Hey everyone, it's Phil. I figured since we were talking a lot of Ron Frenz and Tom DeFalco Amazing Spider-Man issues, that I would try to sit down with the master himself. And guess what? I'm in luck. You're in luck because I get to talk to the great Ron Frenz. Hello again, Ron.
Hi Phil, how you doing? That's a little overstating it, don't you think?
No.
Okay.
All right. So the first, I'm gonna do to make it easier editing for myself. I'm gonna do a jump to one storyline and then jump back to the other ones. But the first one I wanted to ask you about was the two-parter of Amazing Spider-Man 269 and 270, the Spider-Man vs. Firelord.
Okay.
I don't know where I heard this. I'm sure it was online somewhere, so I don't know if it's true. But was this two-parter originally supposed to be like in an annual?
No.
Okay.
No, it was originally done as a two-part story. Where what you've heard is the strange case of once it was completed as two separate issues, it was held back by editorial because they were considering making it an annual or a special or some kind of thing. And in the meantime, they were running fill-in material that kind of made it look like DeFalco and I couldn't make a monthly schedule. And it was very frustrating because, we had those two issues done. We were both wondering why they weren't being run. And the story was that they were, in the office under somebody's arm being considered for some kind of a special one-shot rather than the books that they were intended to be in. So I believe they were originally scheduled to be issues earlier than when they finally ran. I forget exactly what the numbering was, but I believe when I pulled out the Xeroxes on those two issues, the issues they were intended for were actually, like 3 months prior to when they finally ran. That kind of, yeah. So that's where the whole maybe it was supposed to be an annual thing came from. They were originally conceived as two issues of the regular strip, but that's where that confusion comes in.
Okay. I mean, was that a fun story? I mean, especially that second part. It's just like basically Spider-Man and Firelord tearing up the city.
Oh, it was great fun. It was both parts were great fun. DeFalco very deliberately wanted to do at that point in our run. He thought it was time to do a story about putting Spider-Man up against an unbeatable foe. And at the time, we knew we were kind of doing the same kind of story that Roger Stern and John Romita Jr. did with the Juggernaut. And at Tom's, when Tom went looking for somebody that was overpowered and who wasn't getting overused at the time, he came up with Firelord, and I was all for it because, of course, Firelord had been introduced in John Buscema's Thor, and I was a big fan of that design. So we had a lot of fun with it. It's probably one of the issues I get asked about a lot because the perception of it is weird over time. I don't know how much you want to go into this, but okay. I've just found in different conversations with people and on different threads on Facebook and everything that there's a lot of people who have never read the actual story and think that he's in the symbiote. And the only reason he had a chance against Firelord was because he was wearing the symbiote at the time, which, of course, is not the case. And two, that it's just completely and totally ridiculous that Spider-Man could take Firelord at all. But the perception seems to be that he took him in one punch. That he just punched him a lot, and he fell over, which, if you read the story, it's frustrating for Tom and I, because if you read the story, a gas station blows up right under Firelord's face. Oh, yeah. A building collapses on him. There's two issues of Spider-Man throwing everything he can think of at Firelord, and then he hammers him with, almost super speed blows. And but it really it's become bizarrely oversimplified over time, and I've more than a few times somebody will point out, well, it's ridiculous. Spider-Man had a chance against him anyway, let alone beat him. and then somebody will say, yeah, but he beat him because he was wearing the symbiote. And I'll have to like log on and go, no, he wasn't wearing the symbiote. And no, he didn't beat him with just a bunch of punches, that kind of thing. And it's kind of interesting how that's kind of been viewed through the lens of time. And if you want to get into the weeds about, how strong is Spider-Man, and look it up in the Marvel Universe handbooks, and how strong is Firelord, and how Spider-Man would never have a chance against the Silver Surfer, so how could he have a chance against Firelord? That's not really something I enjoy doing. That kind of gets into the whole comics as gaming. That everybody's power sets are not situational. Because everything is situational in a comic book. And I'm very comfortable with that as a storyteller, that at any given moment, Firelord could have flash fried him, but, I'm also a big proponent of Spider-Man's very hard to hit if he doesn't want to get hit.
But, that doesn't even make sense, because, even if he was wearing the symbiote, one of its big weaknesses is fire. I know. Exactly.
But that seems to be, because he's in the black suit, that seems to be what a lot of people are. They're willing to accept it if indeed he was using the symbiote. But that's a really good point. Yeah, one of the symbiote's main weaknesses is fire. So, good point.
But people, if you haven't read that original story, I know they reprinted it in Marvel Tales, I think in the early '90s.
It's been reprinted a few times. It was actually, those. I don't know if you've ever seen them, but the British do these reprints. They call them albums, where they have hard covers. There are only 2 issues, and they're thin, but they have hard covers like storybooks. And I was actually sent one of that when DeFalco spent some time over in England. And one of the things he sent me was an album with a painted cover, an airbrush painted cover and everything of those 2 issues of Spider-Man, just collected in that. But they were also collected most recently in the Epic collection. What was it called? Ghosts of the Past or something, one of the early Epic collections, which collected some of our Spider-Man stuff, and that was included in it. So it was a fun 2 issues. And it is one of those things where, when Spider-Man is put into a weight class, when he has to punch up, it's all about Peter Parker's heart and his never say die attitude and his refusal to quit, and whether or not that's going to serve him well or not. So I've always enjoyed the story. I've always been proud of the story. So why Rubenstein didn't ink part 2, to this day, I cannot tell you why. I don't know, because Joe Rubenstein was one of the most scheduled guys I ever met. I don't think he ever missed a deadline in his life. So he must have had another project going on, or I can't imagine I was running all that late that he wouldn't have been able to join us for it, because Bob McLeod, the guy who did ink it, it's not like he's one of these guys that works super fast or anything, so I would think he had the usual amount of time, because he did a very wonderful job on part 2. But so I don't know. I honestly don't know why both chapters weren't inked by Rubenstein, but they weren't.
But no, you were talking about those reprints. Do you guys get paid again, each time they reprint any of your stories?
Well, I don't know exactly how it all breaks down, but yes, we do get incentive checks when they're reprinted, and so I will get, or have gotten, an incentive check based on my share of the Epic collection and the percentage of what I get for penciling, and it's all very esoteric and borderline science fiction.
Nice. All right, let's jump back to the now let's talk about the symbiote, the alien costume saga. All right, so we'll start with Amazing 252. And that was your second second issue.
That was our second issue. 251 and 252 were both done off of plots by Roger Stern that he had turned in before he moved off the title, and scripted by DeFalco and penciled by me. 251 was done by Klaus Janson, which was an incredible opportunity to work with him. I really enjoyed that issue. 252 brought Brett Breeding on board, And, a lot of people think that was the big event for a new team coming on the book and everything, and then it just wasn't. I was hired to do 6 issues of Spider-Man while John Romita Jr. went off to do X-Men and got X-Men up and running and on schedule. Mm-hmm. Then he was planning on doing X-Men and Spider-Man. So I was only hired to do 6 issues while he took care of that. So 251, 252 were done by a fill-in team, basically. The introduction of the black costume was done by a fill-in team. What ended up happening, pardon me, if you remember, is that 253 and 254 were done by Rick Leonardi.
Okay.
Written by Tom DeFalco and done by Rick Leonardi under 2 different inkers.
Yes.
And I didn't come on for the extended run until 255. And with that issue, it was Tom, plot, and script. It was me penciling and Rubenstein inking, and that ended up being the new team. Now, I don't know at what point all of this happened, but the story I heard is that John Romita Jr. came into Danny Fingeroth, who was the editor, came into Danny Fingeroth's office, and was talking to Danny, and Danny said, "So how's it going on X-Men? You are coming back, right?" And he said, you seem to be happy with the guys you hired. You seem to be happy with what DeFalco and Frenz are doing. And Danny said, yeah, I think they're really clicking, but we're going to stick with the deal. If you want to stick with the deal, we're going to stick with the deal. And at that point, John Romita Jr. turned to Danny Fingeroth and said, you know what? Let him have it. I will stick. I got more than enough work to keep me busy on the X-Men. And, let these guys, if you're happy with these guys, keep them. And the first time I met John Romita Jr. at a convention, I thanked him very much for my run on Spider-Man. So, yeah, it was only supposed to be 6 months. It ended up being 2.5 years. And a couple of editorial changes and all that. But yeah, so 252 was basically done by a bunch of fill-in guys.
And so it wasn't like a big, like you said, it wasn't a big event planned for the new team, but I don't know, was it kind of nerve-wracking? It's like he just started on the book, and now you were the first penciler to draw the black suit.
Well, my stuff was the first stuff that was seen.
Yes.
Because of the way Secret Wars was set up, that was the first anybody had seen of it. And I didn't know anything about it. They were sending me plots, and they sent me a Xerox of a sketch by Mike Zeck of the new suit, and I thought it was a bad guy. I thought it was a new villain. And they said, no, that's Spider-Man's new costume. And for me, it was kind of funny because, pardon me, even with just the 6-issue thing, for me, as a fan of Spider-Man, it was crazy that I was getting a chance to work on The Amazing Spider-Man. But the whole punchline was, after waiting 25 years to finally draw Spider-Man, when I got there, he was wearing a different suit. So that was a little nuts. But yeah, once we got that all straightened out, it was very scary. I mean, this was, a lot of people look back on this through the lens of today, where they're always trying to come up with events and they're always trying to do new stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And this was before all that. This was pre-internet. This was pre all of that. And what Shooter was trying to do was risky in that, he wanted something major to happen to all the main characters involved in Secret Wars, so people would be fascinated by those changes and be compelled to read the Secret Wars series to see how that happened,
Yeah.
But it was, nobody was sure it was going to work. Nobody was sitting there going, oh, we're all going to make a fortune on this, that kind of thing. In fact, we had been getting so much negative mail, snail mail, about changing Spider-Man's costume, that Jim Shooter came into Tom DeFalco's office at one point, and he said, when are you introducing the new suit? And he said 252. And he said, get rid of it in 253. Because we are getting such negative mail, this thing is going to bite us, and we just need to get rid of it. And what DeFalco's argument was, I mean, not that he was overly committed to the new suit or anything, but what Tom DeFalco's argument was, logically, was that he doesn't get the suit until like 8 months into Secret Wars. It was like issue 7 or 8, I think. I'm not sure.
Issue 8, yeah.
Yeah, so that one would correspond with more like Spider-Man 259 or 260. He said, so you can't have him get rid of the suit in Amazing before he gets it in Secret Wars. That's not playing fair with the readers, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So Tom's argument was, we got to hang on to it at least until he gets it in Secret Wars. And Shooter had to agree with that. It was logical.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, okay, fair enough. But the month after it debuts in Secret Wars, in Amazing Spider-Man, get rid of it, which is what we did. Which was, you know, that was the issue where he goes to the Fantastic Four and finds out that it's a symbiote and gets rid of it the first time. So that was the plan. What screwed up the plan was that the snail mail kept coming in after 252, and whereas everybody hated the idea of Spider-Man getting a new suit, once they saw it, they loved it.
Yeah.
So by the time we got to whatever it was, 258, 259, where we were already doing the story where we were getting rid of it, by the time we got there, the mail was overwhelmingly positive and everybody wanted to keep it, which is why they came up with the idea of Black Cat liking the design so much that she just makes a cloth version of it, which is what he was wearing in the Firelord story. So,
but I mean, yeah, I mean, 252 is a big issue. I mean, it's a great story when you you think there's not like a punch thrown in that issue. It's like,
no, it's a quiet story. Yeah, it's definitely a kind of an epilogue to Secret Wars, and it's about Peter Parker reconnecting with humanity, basically, with those two kids and his home of New York.
That was my question about 252. It's like, did they give you like spoilers ahead of time for Secret Wars? Because I know I know the Falco threw in that line about that time Galactus almost stepped on Spider-Man.
I don't know. Well, he was editing. DeFalco was editing Secret Wars, the first Secret Wars, I believe. I'm pretty sure that's the case. So he might have had inside information. I had none.
Okay.
I was working off of the designs of the costume. That was it. I had no idea. We weren't showing anything. You know, we do the scene where Pete's in the dark room developing pictures from it, but I wasn't called upon to show anything. They wanted to make it as mysterious as possible.
Yeah, I wasn't sure because I was like, I'm sure they don't want to show the readers anything, but I didn't know if they told you anything. No,
I was working blind. My only concern was the thin focus on how it affected Spider-Man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you could say that costume was became a big thing. Venom and all that.
Oh, it was huge. It was ridiculously huge. I did a show. I think it was across the border in Canada when 252 was being released, and it was crazy, just crazy. The books were selling and then reselling at a huge markup. Probably not huge by today's standards, but huge by those days' standards. And the crowds were insane. It was one of the few times in my career at a comic book convention that we needed crowd control. My table was migrating from the people all pushed up against it and everything, and it was like crazy Beatles time. It was nuts.
Would you say you probably signed more copies of 252 than any other thing you've worked on?
Probably, certainly in the months in the months following the release of it, definitely. But even now, now I sign a lot of copies of it with the little windows cut into the plastic with the CGC stuff, which frankly I think is ridiculous, but nobody asks me what I think about that stuff.
Modern art.
It's just the idea of putting a comic book in plastic and never reading it again just makes no sense to me at all.
Yeah, I get that. I like to read them over and over. Okay. Anyway, here we'll jump to the next one you worked on was Amazing 255, the first appearance of the Black Fox.
Even a ghost can fear the night.
Yes.
Yeah, I thought Tom DeFalco was writing some very, very wonderful stories. They were nice, self-contained. nice beginning, middle, and an end. There's a character arc. It's basically when Tom and I were really starting to come together as a team. And I mean, I liked him personally, but we would have a lot of conversations about who Peter Parker was and how he thinks. And Tom and I were both, longtime Spider-Man fans. And Tom was very intimidated coming on the book because he's the guy who hired Roger Stern and is second to none in his admiration and fandom of Roger Stern's writing on Spider-Man. So he was intimidated, and I was certainly intimidated. Finally, getting a chance to do Spider-Man after all those years, and I was going back to the original Ditko and doing my best to try to recapture some of that original feeling, because I always go back to the first characters, to the first artist to do a character when I want to see where the root of the character is. I'm always looking for what made that character unique and different to begin with. So I did a lot of pretty intensive study of what Steve Ditko was doing storytelling-wise and everything, and trying to inject that into my work. I mean, it's not like I even came close, but the point is I was making an honest attempt anyway. So yeah, I was at that point falling in love with what DeFalco does story-wise. I might not have been contributing to the stories as much as we ended up doing, as we stayed a team for as long as we did. I mean, we started to co-plot, and I started to contribute more to the stories and everything. But those early stories, not quite so much. But those are really solid, wonderful little stories, and it always gave me a lot to do. Tom DeFalco is a writer. He's a fun writer to work with because he gives the pencil a lot of fun stuff to do.
Oh yeah, I mean, even in your art, it's just, I think that story might have been the first one I ever read with Red Ghost, and I was just like, man, this is a bad dude.
Yeah, it was fun. I enjoyed doing the apes, and I enjoyed doing the story, and it's always fun for me to do a nice 22-page story with a beginning, a middle, and an end, and with a character arc. The Red Ghost goes through a lot in that story, and Spider-Man himself is going through a lot, still adjusting from the Secret Wars and such. Mm-hmm. So, it was, and we were working with the Black Cat character a little bit and all that kind of stuff,
Oh yeah. You probably aren't reading the current books, but they have the Black Fox. I guess now they're saying he was like a teacher for the Black Cat and stuff, like back in the day and stuff.
That's actually an idea that we had.
Oh, really?
I don't know. Great minds may just think alike, but that was an idea that we had back in the day too. Given that they were both that kind of jewel thief and everything, Tom and I had talked about doing stories where it came out that he was one of her mentors. But we just never got around to it. But yeah, I mean, it was very flattering. The 2 or 2.5 years that DeFalco and I spent on the book, Tom's big thing was, and I was a little disappointed as a penciler. I was a little disappointed, but Tom's rule for himself and for us was that we were going to create new characters, new villains, instead of doing the classic characters over and over and over and over again. And in my head, I completely understand that, and I agree with it. I think it's a great way to do a book. But as a fan, I was chomping at the bit to do the classic characters.
Oh yeah.
And over the years, I finally did get to do almost all the classic characters that I wanted to do, all the classic villains. And in the meantime, we created Black Fox and Silver Sable and Puma, and what I was going to say is it's incredibly humbling and flattering because all of these characters kind of stuck with the other writers.
Oh yeah.
Dave Michelinie worked with the Black Fox over an amazing long after we were gone. He and McFarlane did some Black Fox stuff, and DeMatteis and Sal Buscema did Puma stuff in Spectacular Spider-Man.
Oh yeah.
And Silver Sable, of course, got her own title. So it was, it's always fun, not just creating new characters, but creating new characters that kind of resonate with other creators who want to work with those characters too. I mean, that's great. That's that's a lot of fun.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I don't know if they're still doing it, but I mean, they were talking about doing a Black Cat, a Silver Sable movie at one point.
Yeah. I don't know. They have Sony has all the Spider-Man incidental characters through their contract and stuff. Whether any of that actually happens, who knows? I think Silver Sable would be an interesting series. I don't know about movies, but I mean, it should be kind of James Bondian, depending on how you want to do the Wild Pack. Whether you just want them to be a bunch of masked guys like we did, or whether you want them to be individual personalities like Greg Wright did with the series. However you decide to do it, I mean, it could be like Mission Impossible or Bond or any film like that. It could be very cool. Depending on who you cast as Silver Sable, I think she's a fascinating character. Tom DeFalco, when he created those characters, conceived of those characters, he did like whole Bibles and backgrounds on them and would send them to me, and so I could read them before I visually designed them.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was a lot of thought was put into those characters, not just the next throwaway villain. There was a lot of thought given to them because we wanted them to have legs. We hoped that other writers would like them and that the readers would like them and want to see them again and want to see more of them. So, I mean, pretty much from the very beginning, Puma was kind of a noble bad guy, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Let's jump to 256 and 257. Yeah, the first Puma. I mean, very interesting.
He had his own integrity and his own way of doing things that meant a lot to him. And yes, he was a killer for hire, but he wasn't a psycho or anything like that. He gave a lot of thought to who he was and how he did things. And his relationship with Spider-Man became very complicated.
Well, I mean, he was very cold and calculating, but then when he thinks he wrongs Spider-Man, he tries to pay it back, pay back a debt of honor, and then you get that, that whole Beyonder thing, and I mean,
there was a lot of, a lot of that as far as the background of the character and his sense of honor and his own code was very much a part of the character from the very beginning. That DeFalco wanted that to be there, make it a part of the character. So it was fun, and like I said, a lot of these characters, a lot of those characters came from a late night TV offer that Tom DeFalco got called, it was like animal cards, wild animal cards that gave you all kinds of little facts about the animal and stuff, and he. He paid some, $9.99 for these animal cards, but out of there he got Puma and Silver Sable and Black Fox. So it was a worthy investment.
So it was basically just a deck of cards. Who's a dangerous animal? Puma.
Well, if you look back on it, a lot of Spider-Man's characters, a lot of his villains come from the animal kingdom.
Oh yeah.
I mean, the Lizard, Dr. Octopus,
Vulture,
the Hunter, all that kind of stuff. So he was very aware of that. Tom was very aware of that. So when he saw the ad for these things, he goes, "Well, why wouldn't I go to the Animal Kingdom for more ideas for villains?" So so Puma, aside from being a tennis shoe, it was a cool idea for a character.
He was kind of different than the other ones too, because a lot of them just wore costumes. He actually transformed his whole body.
I thought it was a neat idea. I went through a lot of different designs for him. Tom had a fairly strong sense of what he was looking for, and I didn't. So my first design was just a guy wearing a ceremonial mask. And then I did a few that he was too far into the cat range. Looked too much like a cat man. And so Tom kind of brought me back the other direction, and we finally got the look that we both liked. And I enjoy the Puma. I think he's a strong character.
Oh yeah.
I understand a lot has been done to him, and some of it was kind of unfortunate over the last several years. But I have people on my Facebook page. I don't know whether they take pleasure in it or it pains them to tell me that, oh, by the way, this was done to him, or look him up.
Yeah.
Look him up on Google and see all the different things that have been done to him. Yeah, and he has been through a lot. Yeah, no doubt about it.
Well, I guess, when a larger entity owns a lot of the characters you created,
Well, sure. Marvel owns the characters, so whoever Marvel decides is going to control their destiny controls their destinies. It's all there is to it. Thomas Fireheart does not belong to us.
Oh yeah, but at the end of 257, you got to draw that classic panel where Mary Jane tells Peter she's known he's Spider-Man for years.
And again, that was Tom DeFalco. I cannot claim that at all. At one point, Tom called me in the evening, which was not unusual. We would often have long conversations about the upcoming stories. But one night he asked me, so how do you feel about the fact that Mary Jane knows that Pete is Spider-Man? And I went, wow. How long has she known? And Tom said, I don't care. He said, I'm not worried about when she found out or how she figured it out, but I'm working on this one scene, and it was the scene at the end of the Puma story where he had thrown Mary Jane out the door so he could fight Puma, and and jammed the door so she couldn't get back in. And he finally returns to the apartment after the fight with Puma, and she's waiting for him. And he said, as I'm plotting it, Ron, I'm thinking this is just another opportunity for him to tell another lame lie that nobody with half a brain is going to believe.
Well, yeah, because after he pushed her out, they crashed out the window. It's like, well, how to get out of the apartment?
I mean, it was obviously there was something major going on.
Yeah,
that kind of thing. And so Tom's feeling was, as I'm plotting the scene, it just said, okay, are we really just going to have Pete tell another lame lie? And it's going to be obvious to everybody that Mary Jane's not going to believe this lie. And he said, so maybe the real twist should be she just goes, stop it. Just stop it.
Mm-hmm.
I know you're Spider-Man. And we decided to go ahead and do it. The editor didn't have a problem with it at that point, and we decided to go ahead and do it. It was never our intention that was going to make the relationship better. I mean, in fact, we were looking at it as a way of explaining why Mary Jane, swung back and forth as much as she did.
Yes.
And we also had some long conversations about who Mary Jane was as a character and how best to explain her flightiness without, because generally a guy like Pete is not going to be attracted to a woman who's just flighty.
Yes.
Obviously, he was picking up something in Mary Jane because there was a lot of real to Mary Jane. If you read those stories by Jerry Conway and Ross Andrew, there was a lot of real to Mary Jane. A lot of really good characteristics, and yes, she would go off on tangents and she would try to make him jealous, but she was always kind of coming back around to, that was stupid, I'm sorry, and so Tom and I both liked her as a character.
Mm-hmm.
We wanted to explain why we liked her, that she wasn't just this vapid, empty-headed party girl, because that's not how we saw her either. So it became an issue of kind of exploring that and hoping to explain her character a little bit more, which is what we did.
But I mean, I love that I love that whole thing because I love that marriage. I mean, we know they've retconned the marriage, but they, it's been 30 some years. That's still canon. They never retconned that.
Very much so. We never intended for it to lead to marriage. We never intended for it to lead anywhere other than our thinking at the time was in that scene where after she tells him about her past and they're talking in Central Park and they basically decide to be friends, to be best friends.
Yes.
And recognizing the fact that they do have this bond and that they finally have been incredibly honest with each other and that was going to deepen their friendship. And if it led, the most we ever talked about was the possibility of taking them to the edge of marriage and having Pete left at the altar.
Oh.
And that basically came around because one of the ways you write Spider-Man stories is you make a list of all the crappy things that can happen to a human being. You cross off the ones that have already been done, and the ones that are left could be Spider-Man stories.
Yes.
That kind of thing. So we were exploring through the untold story of Mary Jane Watson. We had explored her relationship with her sister and how problematic it was. And so there was what our overall plan, what our long-range plan was that we never got to, was that Pete and Mary Jane were going to plan to get married. But Mary Jane was very ambivalent about it and frankly scared to marry Spider-Man.
Mm-hmm.
And at around the same time the marriage was happening, her sister got in touch with her.
Yes.
And was offering her a chance to reconcile and to bring the Watson family back together. And she used that as an excuse to skip town.
Oh yeah, I mean I know you didn't pencil that one, Ron, but I mean
no.
you remember where they had to come? Pittsburgh.
Well, yeah, we weren't planning on her being in Pittsburgh. We were planning on her being a dancer out in Los Angeles, to tell you the truth.
Oh really?
But yeah, so what Michelini did with it was very different than what we were planning at the time. And the marriage thing just got. I mean, it was all around the same time that we were fired anyway. But the marriage thing was. That got taken away from anybody on the Spider-Man books. That was all decided on by Jim Shooter because Stan was going to do it in the newspaper strip.
Yes.
So yeah, that was nobody's plan that was actually working on the Spider-Man books at the time. That was more of a higher level corporate decision. So, and I was offered the chance to pencil that.
Oh.
And turned it down. So.
Oh, that would be, Ron, Frenz penciling Pittsburgh. That would have been good.
Well, no, not the Pittsburgh stuff. The actual wedding issue.
Oh, the actual wedding. Oh.
Yeah. I was offered the wedding issue after Sal Buscema fell out of the project, and but after a long conversation with the Falco and everything, I kind of decided against it, and it ended up going to Paul Ryan. So.
Yeah.
But I missed my opportunity to be inked by Vince Colletta, too. I was always curious to be inked by Vinny. More on Thor than on Spider-Man, but
yeah.
I never did get a chance to work with him. So, but yeah, it was a lot of stuff towards the end there got very confused and very weird. And anytime you have a character like Spider-Man that's such a corporate success, you're not the only ones who are making decisions about what happens to him next. The big bosses get involved in decisions like that, and that's fair. The company has to take responsibility.
And was the wedding stuff? Was it kind of rushed? Was it something like, Stan's doing it in the strip, we have to get this done in however many months?
I don't remember what the time frame was, but I do remember that it had to be dealt with fairly quickly. In the regular comic to make it work. I believe Dave Michelini was still writing the book at the time. I'm not sure.
I think so.
But they had to do some pretty fast thinking, and I believe that's one of the reasons why they kind of had Mary Jane go to Pittsburgh and meet with her sister and kind of get all of that straightened out to kind of put her in a headspace where she could consider marriage, because I believe it was under Jerry Conway, Pete had proposed and Mary Jane had turned him down.
Yeah.
So there was some history there. There was it wasn't like you had to completely rewrite the characters to get them where you needed them to be or anything, but they definitely had to do some specific stories to set it up for it to happen when it did. Yes. And some of that was kind of reverse engineered. But again, when you're working on a character as high profile as Spider-Man, that's going to happen from time to time.
Oh yeah. But the big Mary Jane issue. I mean, it was mostly Mary Jane. Peter didn't even suit up to the last 2 pages or something. But that
was him getting back in the red and blues.
Man. Oh yeah.
That was a very interesting issue because I kind of I went to the Ditko 9-panel pages and stuff because a lot of it was pedestrian Mary Jane's tragic past stuff, which doesn't really require splash pages or anything. I mean, nothing was blowing up and walls weren't being destroyed or anything. It was just heartbreaking interpersonal stuff. And but yeah, it worked. I believe Tom also was cutting back and forth with Hobgoblin.
Yes.
Attacking different gangster hangouts and stuff, and trying to consolidate his power base and everything. So, we were cutting to Central Park and Mary Jane's tragic story. Then we were cutting to the Hobgoblin doing Hobgoblin stuff, and then we had that final scene where Pete gets back to his apartment and sees that the Hobgoblin's been active again, and puts back on the red and blues and heads out for a couple issues of hoo-ha action, as Tom DeFalco would put it.
Were you like, yes, I get to draw the red and blues again?
Oh, man, the red and blues, that was great. Anytime I got to, during the black costume stuff, anytime I got to throw in a
flashback.
A flashback or him imagining, anytime Tom even suggested that in a panel he was going to be thinking about the red and blue suit, I got to do a shot of the red and blue suit, and I was like, yay! So.
Well, then,
yeah, I can't deny it was a lot of fun to finally get to do the red and blues.
Yeah, but then, the one we kind of skipped over, Amazing 258, when he goes to the Fantastic Four. I mean, you guys kind of had that dream sequence where the black suit's fighting the red and blue suit.
Right. That was, I thought it paid off really well.
Oh, yeah.
I enjoyed doing Reed and Johnny in the burned black suits. And I that whole sequence where they're doing the testing and he finds out. And, I thought that played off well. And, of course, that was also the debut of the bombastic Bagman,
yes,
as he has come to be known. What we originally called him the unknown superhero because he was based on the old unknown comic from the Gong Show was with the paper bag over his head. But yeah, he is. That's a character. We were talking about Puma and Black Fox and Silver Sable. The fact that Bagman is still a thing.
Oh yeah.
And that he's been an action figure, and that he's been in video games,
yes,
as a skin in video games and stuff, is just that's just incredible to me. We never in a million years would have expected that he would, that sequence might be used in a cartoon or a video game or anything like that. So, silliness. It was just us having fun. Johnny pulling a dirty trick on Pete.
I mean, you always question me when I say, you're one of the big time players, but it's like when your stuff gets into like other, forms of media, it's like, come on.
Well, like I said, it's very flattering the fact that the fact that we were really on the book originally for 2.5 years, and yet we were able to make an impact by creating new characters and everything. Believe me, I appreciate it. I'm very proud of our run, and the fact that we contributed. Mostly we just kept the wheel spinning, but the fact that we contributed some new concepts and new ideas and new characters, I'm very proud of that. I look back on, some of the artwork. I wish I could take another shot at it because I'd like to think I've improved, but there's nothing in there that I would apologize for because it was Tom and I becoming a real solid team as well, and I love that character. I mean, by the time what happened, and we were fired by Jim Owsley, it broke my heart. I mean, it was awful in every way you could imagine.
I remember the first time I read that Alien Costume Saga. It was in trade. I got it as a kid. I could not put it down, Ron, until I finished from cover to cover. I mean, I think I went out that day at the dinner with my parents. I had the book in one hand. I had food in the other hand. I could not put this book down.
Well, that's very flattering because that's anytime you're telling a story, you'd like to be able to think that you're telling it well enough that people can't put it down. So
oh,
that's
yeah.
Very nice to hear. Yeah. I hope your parents weren't too pissed off at you.
Oh no, it's like, hey, he's reading.
Better than a phone, anyway.
Exactly. Okay. What was like your favorite moment from that era, from that whole black suit era?
Oh, Phil, I'd be hard pressed.
There's not
really
like,
would.
or like your favorite, like their favorite
I'll tell
issue
you what
to
I'm
draw.
going to do. I will pick one, but it's not just because it's like the best Spider-Man moment, or because it's not. It's a quiet Pete moment, but it's one of the first times, as I said, Tom and I were still getting familiar with each other. We were still getting to know each other as a creative team, and one of the first scenes that I plotted myself, that basically I got the plot from Tom, and in fact it was the lead-in to the walk in Central Park with Mary Jane, okay? But in the original plot it basically just said Mary Jane, finally gets around to asking, it's funny, I never found out, I never heard how you became Spider-Man. I still don't know how you became Spider-Man. And Pete tells her. And it was was an anniversary issue. Was it 275 maybe?
Maybe.
Where we then we reprinted the original Stan Lee, Steve Ditko Spider-Man origin. But what ended up, as I read the plot, I said, okay, she asks, but my feeling was Pete would have a reaction to this, okay? Because it's been several issues since she announced that she knew he was Spider-Man. And she's only now getting around to asking, how'd you become Spider-Man? And my feeling was that Pete would be very aware of that time lapse. It's like, okay, she knows I'm Spider-Man, but she's avoiding me. She's not curious. She's avoiding me. She's, this has freaked her out, and okay, I can understand that to a certain degree, but for me, it was one of these situations where I think Pete lives a fairly lonely life. Even once he's married to Mary Jane and everything, you can't, how do you talk to somebody about being Spider-Man? And how do you get somebody to understand that it all has to do with screwing up and Uncle Ben getting killed?
Yeah.
I mean, he's constantly dealing with that to one degree or another. And that's something that you can tell somebody who loves you dearly about that, but that's still not the same thing.
Yeah. You're
still alone in that feeling. So I tend to think that there's a lot of, loneliness to Pete being Spider-Man.
Yes.
So I kind of wanted to communicate that. I wanted Mary Jane to have to work for that moment that, that Pete says, you didn't want to know. You never asked. Yeah. You didn't want to know. I get it. Fine. And he walks away from Mary Jane, and then she comes up to him on the subway platform and takes his hand and says, "You're right. I'm asking now." And just that moment, that moment between the characters was one of the first things that I ever contributed to a Spider-Man story besides the drawings. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And Tom liked it. He liked the idea. He thought it was insightful and worked. And he said, do it. So I did it. And we even got the quiet moments in there with a couple of panels with no talking. So that scene in whatever issue it is, 275, I would have to say that scene means a lot to me because it was a major contribution. I felt it was a major contribution to the character of Pete, and it was my first. So there you go.
And that's why you're the A-team, because you guys got the back and forth. And
then I could also just list all the other times I got to draw Peter Parker and all the other wonderful stories I got to be a part of, like Hobgoblin Lives and Spider-Girl and
oh, yes.
on and on and on and on and on. I have been very blessed as a Spider-Man fan to be as involved with the character over the last 40 years as I have been. I do not take it for granted. It means the world to me that I have contributed in any way to the character. So.
All right. Well, I'm gonna leave that there. I mean, that's a beautiful end. That's a beautiful
Fair
ending.
enough.
But
Fair enough.
all right. But again, thank you again for speaking to me again. You know.
Well, I enjoy talking to you, and I appreciate the fact that you guys are out there doing these podcasts and keeping this material alive and keeping it in front of people. That's terrific. I storytellers want their stories to be told. You know, anytime we can get a group of people together and say, "Have you tried this one?" and have them hopefully enjoy it as well, as that's why we do it. So I thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, I told you, you and you and Tom stuff. I mean, Thor and Spider-Girl, I love it, but it's like Spider-Man is like the first thing I discovered you on. I love the character. I love the stuff you guys do on it. It's done with it. And
I've often wondered if Tom and I had first teamed up on a different character, if we would have connected the same way. I'd like to think we would have. But, I mean, there was definitely a very deep connection with, him loving the character and my love for the character really helping us to kind of gel as a team. So, that's always going to be incredibly special for both of us. And it managed to translate into Thor. And for us, Spider-Girl was just an extension of what we had done on Spider-Man. I never felt like we were still doing the same kinds of stories. And when we did the very first Spider-Girl story, it just felt like we were doing a reunion, like we were coming back to Pete and Mary Jane after 16 years and checking in with them, and I think that's one of the things that helped that stand out as a what-if story is that Tom and I had such a personal connection with the character, and we were playing into that in that story. And I think that's one of the reasons why people noticed it. And we ended up getting years of Spider-Girl material from it,
Oh, yeah.
All right, man. Thank you very much.
Hey, but before you go, again, tell everyone what you're working on now.
Well, it would be the same answer I gave you the last time. I'm still working on the Blue Baron for Sid Comics. If Marvel calls, be happy to work on stuff for Marvel. We did that 10-page Spider-Man story not too long ago for the 80th anniversary that ran in, what was it called? Spider-Man...
what was
it? Was the Sensational Spider-Man something.
Yes, yeah.
And we did that. We did a 10-page Thunderstrike story for the Worthy, and so anytime Marvel is offering us stuff, we will be happy to do it. But mostly, I'm working on Blue Baron for Sid Comics and doing commissions through CatskillComics.com. So, but that's more than enough for one guy, believe me.
And I see there's like a few local shows coming up. Are you making any appearances at any of these shows?
I do the Pittsburgh show every year. I don't know when it's falling. I think it's usually in May sometime.
Okay.
I'm actually doing a Heroes Con in June with DeFalco, so that should be fun because I really don't do a lot of shows anymore. But and I usually do a show in Akron. That I've enjoyed over the last several years. It's under new management now, but it seems to be doing okay. So as long as they ask me to, it's an easy drive for me. So as long as they ask me, I'll keep doing it. So but yeah, it's. Believe me, it's amazing to me that I'm still getting paid to draw superheroes. So I'm the luckiest guy in the world. Believe me.
So the May's the local show. I was gonna say one of these days I'm gonna have to meet you again at a con.
Yeah, you have to look it up online. It's the Three Rivers Con.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's a good show. They've only been doing it for a few years now, but it's a terrific show, and it's almost all comics. They don't bring in media guests and stuff. There's another show here in town that does all that stuff.
Yeah.
But Three Rivers is mostly comics, and again, as long as they ask me to show up, I'll keep coming to that one because it's 10 minutes away from me. So
nice.
All right.
Thank you, sir. Once again.
Bill, you take care of yourself, man.
Hey, you too.
Good work.
Thank you.
Talk to you soon.
See ya.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Great Ron Frenz, everyone. Go pick up his work. Like I said, it had a big impact on my life, and I know if you're a big Spider-Man fan, and would have a big impact on yours. So hope you enjoyed the issues, and I hope you enjoyed these behind-the-scenes takes with Mr. Ron Frenz. All right, everyone. Until next time, swing on back.